Hello and welcome back to the Specialist Learning Podcast. I'm Katie Nelson, Dyslexia and Dyscalculia Specialist and founder of the Dyslexia and Dyscalculia Academy. Each month I use this space to share reflections from practice, insights from specialist work and things I see every day when supporting learners and families. The aim is always to give you something really practical to think about, something that helps you understand dyslexia and dyscalculia more deeply, and something that you can take straight into your own practice or home life. So, wherever you're listening from today, whether you're driving, having a cup of tea, or just taking that quiet moment, I'm really glad that you're here. Today I want to talk about something that comes up all the time, especially around this time of year. And it's a situation where a learner does know something, but in an exam, it just doesn't come out. Now, you might have seen this really clearly in your own sessions. You go through something together, maybe a comprehension question, maybe a maths method, and the learner gets it. They explain it, they talk it through. You think, yeah, they've got this. This is secure. Then the following week, you give them something similar, and it's like it's just completely disappeared. Or even more commonly, they'll say something like, I knew this yesterday, or perhaps, I remember doing this, but I can't think now. And I hear this all the time in assessments as well. A learner will look at a question, pause, and you can almost see that they're searching for the answer, and then they'll just say, I don't know. But it doesn't feel like a true I don't know. It feels like something is getting in the way. And that's exactly what's happening. Because an exam situation places a very different demand on the brain compared to a supported session. In a session, you're often guiding your learners, prompting, reducing load without even realising. In an exam, all of that support is removed. So suddenly the learner has to hold the question in mind, work out what it's asking, search their memory, organise their answer, write it down, keep track of time, and manage that underlying pressure of, this matters. And that's a lot. And what I often say to tutors is this: it's not that the learner has lost the knowledge, it's that the conditions for accessing it have changed. Let me give you a really typical example here. So you might ask a learner in a session, tell me what a noun is, and they'll say a naming word. Great. Then in an exam, the question might say, identify the noun in the following sentence. Now suddenly they're not just recalling a definition. They're reading a full sentence. They're holding that in working memory. They're remembering what a noun is. They're applying it and then selecting the correct word. And that's where it can break down. Another one I see a lot, especially with older learners, is you ask them a question and they'll say, I don't know. So you say, okay, let's just talk it through. And within about 20 seconds, they get there. And you think, you did know that. But what they needed was time, a starting point, and reduced pressure. So this is where we can really support learners in a practical way, not just by revising content, but by practicing how to access that content. So here are a few things that you can start doing straight away in your sessions. One simple way is this. So when a learner says, I don't know, don't move on too quickly. Instead, try saying, let's just stay with it for a moment. Or tell me anything you do know about this. You'll often find they can give you something, even if it's partial, even if it's slightly muddled, and that's the starting point. Another really useful one is giving a first step. So instead of answer the question, You might say, let's just read the question together first. Or circle the key word. What you're doing there is actually reducing that initial overwhelm. You're helping them enter the task. You can also model thinking out loud. So this is really powerful and often underused. You might say something along the lines of, okay, I'm looking at this question. I can see it's asking me to explain. So I'm going to start by thinking about, and you're showing them what that internal process looks like. Because for many of our learners, that process isn't yet secure. Another thing I'd really encourage is practicing under gentle pressure, gentle being the key word. So not high pressure, but just enough to stimulate that feeling. So that might be, let's try this one in 2 minutes, or I'm going to ask you, you've got a few seconds just to think before you answer, and then afterwards talk about it. How did that feel? Where did it get tricky? Because we want our learners to start recognizing their own patterns. And one more that I think is really important is normalizing that blank moment. You can say things like, sometimes your brain just needs a few seconds to find it, doesn't it? Or that doesn't mean you don't know it. Because so many learners interpret that moment as failure, when actually it's just a pause in retrieval. And when we reduce that emotional pressure, we often see the answer come through much more easily. Before we finish today, I'd like to leave you with a small reflection. So the next time a learner doesn't respond in the way you expected, maybe they say, I don't know, maybe they give a very short answer, maybe they freeze a little. Just pause and ask yourself, what part of the process might be getting overloaded here? Because when we start to see learning in that way, we move from simply checking answers to really understanding what's happening underneath. And that's where the most powerful support sits. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope it's given you something practical to reflect on in your own practice or at home. And if you're listening on Spotify or another podcast platform, make sure you check the session notes where you'll find the supporting resource linked to this episode. And if you're listening inside the Tutor Vault, you'll know that alongside each podcast episode, you can access a growing library of specialist tools designed to support learners with dyslexia and dyscalculia. If you're not inside the Tutor Vault yet and you'd like access to those resources, you can head over to www.dyslexia-academy.com. Thank you again for being here. Until next time, take care and keep supporting learning with understanding.